You have a photo of yourself at 8 months old. Someone is holding you. You are laughing. You have no idea who took that photo, where you were, or why you were laughing. You will never know. Not because the memory faded, because it was never stored in the first place. And the real answer to why is much stranger than forgetting. Your brain was working perfectly that day. Your eyes saw the room, your ears heard the voice, your skin felt the arms around you. Every sense was online and functioning. So where did it go? For most of the 20th century, the answer people gave was Sigmund Freud's. Freud called this gap infantile amnesia. He believed you buried those early years on purpose, that your mind repressed them because they were too emotionally charged to keep. It sounded convincing for decades. It was also almost entirely wrong. The real explanation is not about hiding memories. It is about a brain that has not finished building the shelf to put them on. Think about your hippocampus. It sits deep in your brain and it acts like a filing system. When something happens to you, your hippocampus is supposed to bind together the sights, sounds, smells, and emotions of that moment into a single retrievable file. That is what a memory actually is. Not a recording, a reconstruction stitched together from stored fragments every time you recall it. Here is the problem. When you were an infant, that filing system was still under construction. Neuroscientist Paul Frankland and his colleague Sheena Jocelyn, working at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, ran a series of experiments on infant mice to understand this. They found that the infant hippocampus produces new neurons at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis, and it is wonderful for learning. It is terrible for memory storage. Why? Because those new neurons don't just add space. They rewire the existing connections around them. Frankland and Jocelyn discovered that this flood of new neurons in early life actually overwrites and destabilizes memories almost as fast as they form. Your infant brain was building itself so quickly that it was bulldozing its own archive in the process. Does that mean babies don't remember anything? Not exactly. This is where it gets stranger. Psychologist Carolyn Rovey Collier spent decades studying infant memory using a surprisingly simple method. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months old quickly learned that kicking made the mobile move. Weeks later, when placed under the same mobile, they started kicking again. Immediately, they remembered. So infants can form memories. They can even hold onto them for weeks. But there is a catch. Those memories are almost entirely tied to context. Change the crib liner, change the room, change the mobile slightly, and the memory vanishes. The baby kicks as if it never happened. The memory existed, but it had no stable address. It couldn't be pulled up on command in a new setting years later, the way an adult memory can. This is the real distinction. It is not that infants fail to remember. It is that infants fail to remember in the specific format adults need for long-term recall. Researcher Patricia Bauer, who has spent her career studying how memory develops in early childhood, found something that reframes the entire question. Children do form autobiographical memories earlier than Freud ever imagined. The real turning point isn't infancy. It's somewhere between ages 3 and 7, when the brain finally develops the narrative machinery to store memories in a form that survives into adulthood. Bauer's research points to language as a key piece of that machinery. A 2-year-old experiences an event fully, but without the words to encode that event into a story with a beginning, a sequence, a cause, the memory has nothing to hold on to. It's like trying to save a file with no file format. The experience happened. The save button never got pressed correctly. So somewhere around age 3 or 4, something shifts. You start narrating your own life to yourself without realizing it. That shift doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in as your vocabulary expands, as your sense of yesterday and tomorrow solidifies, as your hippocampus stops sacrificing old files for new construction and finally starts preserving them. This is why your earliest clear memory almost never comes from infancy. It usually surfaces from somewhere around age 3.5. Ask most adults for their first memory and you'll hear a scattered fragment. Not a full scene. A dog barking, a hospital room, sand between their toes. Fragments because the narrative-building machinery was still coming online, catching only pieces before it was fully operational. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you cannot remember the two most formative years of your life, the years when your brain absorbed your first language, your first attachments, your first sense of safety or fear, does that mean those years didn't shape you? The evidence says the opposite. Roe v. Collier's ribbon experiments proved that infants encode enormous amounts of procedural and emotional information, memory that shapes behavior without ever surfacing as a conscious, tellable story. This is called implicit memory, and it doesn't need the hippocampus's narrative filing system at all. It lives somewhere more primitive, more automatic. Your fear of dogs might trace back to an early scare you'll never consciously recall. Your sense of comfort in a certain kind of embrace might trace back to arms you can't name. You're not missing those years, you are carrying them. They just arrived without a label. This changes how you might think about your own childhood and even how you think about the childhoods happening around you right now. A toddler screaming because a routine broke is not being dramatic. Their explicit memory can't yet reassure them that this has happened before and turned out fine. Their narrative brain isn't built yet. All they have is the immediate feeling, unfiltered by story. And it changes something else too. It means the years you can't remember were not wasted, and they were not erased by some Freudian defense mechanism protecting you from trauma. They were the years your brain was too busy building itself to also keep a diary. Neurogenesis was rewriting your hippocampus daily. Every new skill, every new connection quietly erased yesterday's file to make room for today's growth. There's something almost generous in that trade. Your brain chose growth over archiving. It chose to become rather than to record. By the time it slowed down enough to start keeping a permanent record around age 3 or 4, you were already a person with language, with attachments, with a personality taking shape, built entirely on a foundation you will never consciously revisit. So the next time you look at a photo of yourself as a baby, laughing at someone you'll never identify, remember this. That memory isn't lost somewhere in your mind waiting to be found. It was never filed away because the version of you in that photo was still too busy building the very brain that would one day wonder where it went. And in a strange way, that means the years you remember least are the years that made you most.